right, are we here? We're ready to go? Okay, welcome back. We're having such a fun time talking about social cost-benefit analysis and how to evaluate projects. Who knew this could be so much fun? Drawing that magic line between yes and no. It's like in a fairy tale where you're offered eat me, don't eat me, drink this, don't. All right, and like Alice in Wonderland, we have to have some way through the madness. And so we've been talking about social cost-benefit analysis. Recall we have, so any project we think of as some perturbation in some resources, some consumed, some negatives, some positives in a vector. We have some prices, and we have some, these are added up over T, that is some net present value of our social profits. We want that to be as big as possible. That's how we imagine we're doing this stuff. All right, so far so good, yes? Now, been some good questions about how we do this. Does it make sense? We're going to delve in today to some more of this. We're going to today particularly we're going to interrogate more the background assumptions that we're making as we adopt this strategy, this analytic approach. Talk about some of the strengths and some of the weaknesses that I identify in this approach. And this will set us up to talk about alternative approaches. This is probably a good time, maybe even earlier was a better time, but there's a saying, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is today. So today we will plant the seed of what I would like from you. So I'd like you to think about a presentation that you will give. This is what I would like you to do. So in the last day of class, Friday, May 12th, I'd like you to prepare a short presentation. Here's what I'd like you to do. Think about one project, or one program, or one priority, or one sector, something associated with Ukraine's reconstruction. Okay? Think about how you would evaluate this program or project or sector in the framework of social cost-benefit analysis. I am not necessarily asking that you do this with data or with a full financial analysis. You're very welcome to do that if that is something you feel able to do and equipped to do. And if data to do, that's great, but you don't have to. You just kind of talk about it. And then talk about some other kind of decision technique or tool or some other kind of orientation. And then compare them and talk about how social cost-benefit analysis might give you different answers, or maybe the same answers, so just compare them, okay? So what are the points, so my goals for this exercise are a few. One, it's an opportunity to think about Ukraine's reconstruction, and think about some of the needs, and maybe think about some area that's of particular resonance or importance to you, something that you feel is important. It's an opportunity to think about how you evaluate projects, how you evaluate priorities, and different techniques for doing so. It's an opportunity to think about this social cost-benefit analysis framework, which is really grounded in the same assumptions that we make in, let's say, classical economics, classical microeconomics, same kinds of assumptions about human behavior, about how we measure human welfare, and compare that or think about that in context of some other way of thinking about the problem. We're going to be talking about other ways. Maybe you can do your own thinking about it. Maybe you have your own philosophical training or background that you can bring to bear. But this is what I'd like you to do. Okay? So the challenge is clear. Now, what I'm hoping, we will have some sign up for this. This is, what can I say? This is not a course for credit, so therefore, I have no, police force to dispatch to elicit punishment if you fail to do this. It would be great for you to do this, that's all I'll say. It would be, I think, a good opportunity for you.
Punishment does not work in Ukraine.
Punishment does not work, no. What can I offer? Here's what I can do. I'm going to be interviewed on TV today.
Cool.
On channel Svoboda, all right? And if I suspect that you're not going to give a presentation, I will read out your name and embarrass you on national television.
Okay, that works.
That works? All right, so that's the... All right, so that's the hope, and as we get closer to that date, we'll find out how many people are actually going to give a presentation. And then we'll work out a schedule. So, but my thought is, what?
This Friday.
No, the last Friday, which is May 12th.
Can we start a week before?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I will be absent the last one.
Right. So my expectation is that since I gather more people online than here, it's better. We'll figure out the online versus in-person thing. But yes, if you want to, maybe a week from tomorrow, That would be great. Okay, and that way you give everyone else by the bravery and virtue of your example, they will be inspired as well.
I was made very good for this,
What? You're made for this? This is Saint Olya who leads us on. Okay. All right. So that's a good setup for thinking about this idea of doing a comparison between social cost-benefit analysis and other kinds of frameworks. This is a good thing to have in mind as we talk today. Step back a little bit. We've talked about what this framework is, and now we're going to talk about some of the background assumptions and what I see as some strengths and weaknesses. I am open to other your input in this list as well. So pause for that, and that applies very much to Pini, especially as we talk about the philosophical assumptions behind social cost-benefit analysis and its relationship to utilitarianism. So, background assumptions. So some of these are, let's say, technical, and some are philosophical. I don't think there's really a hard line between those, between these categories, but first there's we've spoken a bit about how you do this, and critical is there is some ability to estimate with reasonable rigor and precision what are all these social accounting prices for different kinds of resources. We've talked a little bit about some of the difficulties of estimation. And I hinted that I think maybe an excess amount of the intellectual resources of my field have been dedicated to refinements on the techniques for figuring out some of these accounting prices. But maybe that's jumping ahead to the weaknesses. There's some assumption that we can do this. It gets, and let's say, the further away we get from a competitive market for that resource, the harder it is to identify and estimate exactly which are the correct social accounting prices to use. So if the resource is one that is traded in a fast-moving, robust, competitive market, the market price gives us a good measure. We're good to go. If we're talking about things that are, maybe distorted markets or close to markets, it's maybe not quite as good. It's not, but so there'll be some errors. Maybe it's okay. Maybe it's okay. I mean, there's going to be some errors. What do we actually, how precise do we actually need the answers to be? This is a very important general principle for lots of different work. Don't bother too much with precision if it will make no difference to the result of your decision. You care about precision if and only insofar as it helps inform your decision. If your analysis says this project generates $400 million of surplus, this one generates $20 worth of surplus, but we have some uncertainty, plus or minus 10% here, let's not spend any more time narrowing down and figuring out exactly what's the right accounting price for resource number 23 on our list. We've got enough information to make our decision. For lots of institutional reasons, I see a lot of people spending a lot of their lives working late, eating Chinese food out of boxes, refining to the second decimal place the estimates on these kinds of parameters when it's not going to make any difference to the decision that's actually made. There's all kinds of reasons for that, but let's take care not to do that. Okay. So as you get farther away from markets, it gets harder to estimate these accounting prices. We talked some about for example, you can say clean air, nice views, pleasant sounds. These are all things that are useful, but they're not traded in markets, so you have to use various increasingly indirect methods to try to estimate these accounting prices. Although sometimes this matters a lot. So let's give you an example. There's maybe you're too young, my gosh. Good morning. Maybe anybody here remember the Exxon Valdez?
Sorry?
Exxon Valdez. This deserves to be written in red.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Okay. Blub, 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 blub. The Exxon Valdez was an oil tanker. So Exxon is the largest, it's now ExxonMobil after a merger, the largest oil company in the United States, one of the largest in the world. And they had this oil tanker full of crude oil. It was picking up a load of oil from Alaska. They have, up in Alaska, they pump oil, take it down this pipeline, and then at the port of Valdez, tankers come, they get loaded up, and this particular tanker, driven by a guy who'd been out drinking all night, went and spilled a huge bunch of oil. Okay, then there was, of course, as in the way of such things, especially in the United States, a big lawsuit. And one of the big questions was to estimate the damages. How much damage was caused by this oil all over the place? Lots of dead birds, lots of dead fish, lots of fisheries that are going to have oil in them for generations. Actually, my connection, my ex-father-in-law, that is my ex-wife's father, would go up every summer to fish salmon in Alaska, and he actually got a check out of the settlement for this because he could not fish his salmon in Alaska anymore. So you can estimate think about this a minute. How would you and this is very closely related to these accounting prices for the resource. We have a sudden drop in tourism, fishing, got dead birds that are ugly. And you're the state of Alaska, and you go to the court and you're suing Exxon and you say, we want compensation for all this damage. How would you, what's the price tag? What's the number? Like, you want a lot, but how would you argue? Well, part of the problem here is that most of the damages really, I mean, the actual direct economic impacts weren't all that big. There wasn't all that much tourism going up to Valdez, Alaska. There wasn't all that, these fishing boats, it's, the salmon is worth something. The birds didn't buy anything. There's a bunch of oil all over the place, but so, the point is, if you were just looking in things that are directly traded in markets, and you're trying to measure the economic impact, you would actually say there's not that much impact. In fact, the cleanup operation was a huge boost of money into the economy, because all of these cleanup people bought stuff. And so in looking directly at the economic impact in terms of markets, you'd say this Exxon Valdez spill was a big winner for the economy, and we should do this more often.
Math doesn't work.
What?
Math doesn't work directly.
The math doesn't work? Don't blame math.
No, it's good math, but bad decision.
Bad thinking. So what's the problem? In terms of, think about it in terms of accounting prices.
Ecological damage.
Ecological damage, what about it?
We can count the quality of resources that was affected by this leak.
Yes?
We can count the damage to the people's health living in this area.
Yes.
And we can try to count the loss in economical terms of the business and small business that didn't open in this area because of the damage of the ecological stuff, living and so on.
Yes.
This place. 3.
Okay.
And
yes.
Supply of fish has.
And supply of fish has been, right. Okay. But that's all true. But again, these direct damages, the supply of fish, tourism, businesses, there weren't very many businesses opening up, and it's a pretty remote area anyway. So the problem is there was a huge damage to the natural environment, and most of that, what was happening there wasn't traded in markets anyway. So we have to somehow come up with a price for the environmental damage that is not really actually closely connected to any market activity, but it's real. I mean, this is big, it's disgusting, this enormous amount of oil all over, and it's, a lot of it's still there, decades later, still causing environmental damage. So one method so one of my professors at Berkeley was involved with this court case as a consultant to the state of Alaska, and one thing that they did was they used a method called, the method is called contingent valuation. The upshot is you use surveys. You ask people, how much would you be willing to pay, or how much would you be willing to accept as compensation, or, kind of, so why would you do this? Well, part of the answer is, what else are you going to do? You say this environmental damage is important to people, and you need a number somehow. So one way of figuring out how important the environment is to people is to ask them. The court, so my professor and others were involved with this, created a report, said, it's $1 billion, give or take. Big number. And the court said, okay, and Exxon, you need to pay $1 billion. They were very, very unhappy with this. And they proceeded to fund an intellectual public relations campaign against the technique of contingent valuation.
Wow.
To fund conferences, papers, workshops, volumes, all attacking this technique because they wanted to destroy the intellectual underpinnings of this, because that cost them $1 billion. Pretty exciting. Who knew economic theory, environmental economics, could be so interesting and dynamic? So there's, again, farther away you get from markets, there's an MIT professor who I don't know, I don't want to get into it. They hired some fancy big name economist to sell their reputations to Exxon to attack this stuff. It pissed me off. These are people who knew better. Okay, so the further away you get from market data, market transactions, the harder it is to estimate the correct accounting prices. So that's a challenge for the technique. But let's talk even more then about let's say the philosophical underpinnings. Why are we so focused on market data and observing market transactions? Why is that so important? Why do we think that if and only if we have market transactions to observe, that we can extract valuations that are real and that we can actually put in our analysis? Why do we believe that? What do you think?
Because we consume the actual resources with actual numbers.
Yes?
And we need some technique to put it together. How much does it cost? It costs the real money.
Yeah?
And then we need to set up the second part of it. So what's the benefits? It's like trying to balance this stuff. We cannot take the real money and give the not real input. It's a huge ground for fraud and so on.
Okay. So this is right. Here's the claim. The claim is that if we're going to do this stuff, we need to be grounded in something. We need to be grounded in something. And in particular, we want to be grounded in something real where people have to make actual decisions. People will say all kinds of things when they don't have their real money on the line. You want to know, as we said before, don't tell me what you value, show me your budget, and I'll tell you what you value. If I can see you actually giving up something to get something else, then I know that you value what you got at least as much as what you gave up, right? So the assumption behind both of these, so core assumption, there's we'll call it. Now I need to know. Okay, there is in the background here is we're assuming the philosophical attitude based on behaviorism. What does that mean? It means we don't care what you say, we don't care what you think, we don't care what you talk, what you imagine, what you say are your ethics. What we care about is your behavior. That's real data. And part of the reason for this is that especially the 19th, early 20th century, economics was really interested in becoming a real science. They were going to be a real science. They were not going to be, just treated like journalists. They were going to have data, and the data were going to be real. And we're not going to listen to what you say, we're going to look at what you do. And this came along with a great skepticism, in fact, about the kinds of stories and narratives that people say and we're going to say we're only going to treat observable behavior as admissible data, and preferably observable transactions. So transactions are admissible. Somebody has to give up something to get something else. That's real. What they say about it is less real, maybe not real at all. Or maybe it's just, there's a phrase, cheap talk. People will say anything. Okay. There's something to that. There's to remember what behaviorism is, there's a joke. So two behaviorists meet on the street, and one says to the other, "Oh, I see that you are doing very well today. Tell me, how am I?" You see, they don't actually, there's no ability to say how you, only what you observe someone else doing is real. What you introspectively think about yourself, this is not real. So only someone else can tell you how you're doing. There's by the way, I won't do it on camera and in a class, but there are raunchier versions of this joke that you can imagine. Yes?
I want to mention to the class.
Hang on.
I hope you all heard about Noam Chomsky.
Noam Chomsky.
So Noam Chomsky is a very famous linguist and political activist, philosopher. When he was very young, he wrote a paper against behaviorism. A very, very famous and interesting paper. I'll make it available. So he was 29 years old. He basically kills behaviorism. Skinner, what's his name?
B.F. Skinner.
B.F. Skinner was the proponent of behaviorism. And this 29-year-old destroyed it intellectually, this whole movement. So it's just worthwhile to know.
Absolutely.
Interesting, the economics is still based on that idea.
Correct. These are both what Pina just said, these are both correct. Behaviorism has been intellectually destroyed, and yet, like the zombies in the zombie movie, in economics, it keeps going and going. We still have a field that is based on behaviorism, even though intellectually we know it's not credible. Because, why? Because we want real data based on real things, real transactions. Because we're real science. Just like physics, we're real. Yeah, there's the play on the, again, I can't say everything out loud, but there's a Freudian concept which is approximately physics envy. That's what economics has. So behaviorism is a background assumption that tells us, therefore, reflections about our values and about ethics and the importance to us of children, the importance to us of our elders, the importance to us of our national memories. This is all talk. This is all just so much noise. You want to know how much we actually value children? Look at how much money we put in real resources into children. That's the only thing that counts. It is an attitude that is profoundly suspicious towards ethical, moral, philosophical reflection, or even group conversation, or even a conclave where we together decide, say, what our values are. That's all just chat. What matters is what we actually, in the end, decide to put resources in. So a second core belief is closely related, is that people have preferences. You're born into this world just like it's the economic analog of your, I don't know if they have this in the Orthodox, in Catholicism, my faith tradition, you have a very strong concept of original sin.
Yeah.
Yes, the same, okay. So you come into this world and you're already stamped with your original sin. So the economic, and then, the more modern idea, you come into this world, you've already got your DNA, and it's already, kind of defines, in a sense, who you are. So in economics, you come into this world and you've already got your preferences. They are you, effectively, as an economic agent. They define what you want and what you value and what you will go for, and therefore what your behavior is going to be. They are, in the more orthodox, pravoslavny, versions of this theory, they are stable, consistent. You follow them consistently in all your decisions. Did you have your hand up? No. Karina, you had your hand on your ear, which looks like you're asking a question, but instead was simply an awe. Yes. Okay. Now let's recall briefly how we imagine these preferences working to generate decisions. You've all seen the microeconomic story of, let's say, we go to the grocery store and we see there are available apples and bananas. All right, and we have some utility function, see apples, and this is the number of apples, or our consumption of bananas. And we imagine generally, we like, that's often the case, not necessarily, often the case that people like some of each. They're happier if you had to choose between 10 bananas or 5 bananas and 5 apples, you'd rather have 5 of each because it gets monotonous to have only bananas. So we imagine that but if you had 10 bananas versus 2 bananas and 2 apples, you'd rather maybe have 10 bananas. Okay, so any combination of a number of apples and a number of bananas defines some level of satisfaction, and you can rank all different combinations of apples and bananas, and you can assign say which one you prefer, this to this, or you're about equal between them, and you can represent, so you come endowed with your fixed stable preferences over different combinations, different bundles, and you then can formally, for convenience, construct a utility function which assigns a number to different preference levels. It's not kind of a real number, it just is a way of describing this rank ordering over bundles. This is all familiar from microeconomics, okay? And so we imagine that you can as this is the sorry, I should have right. So we can, as you add more, we suppose more is better. More apples is always better given the same number of bananas. More bananas always better given the same number of apples. We are insatiable. No number of bananas is good enough so we say, stop, I really don't need any more bananas. We have decreasing, there's various, you've seen these decreasing marginal utility of banana. The 20th banana isn't quite as much fun as the first. but we always want more. And so we can then imagine constructing these iso-utility curves. These are combinations of apples and bananas that give us, that we are indifferent between them, just as happy with anything along these lines. Everyone up here is better than everyone down here, etc. Now, then we go shopping. We've got a budget, and we go, and our budget says, given the prices that we encounter in the grocery store, anything in here we could buy. These are all attainable within our budget. Every combination of apples and, are you too happy, you see, Ilya and Karina? This is all familiar? No?
For me, not too.
Okay, we'll come back to that. We'll come back to it. Okay. Are you? This is the happy row and the unhappy row. Okay. So I imagine a dashed line in between happy and unhappy. Okay. So any combination in here is attainable within our budget given the prices. We want to pick that combination which gets us on highest utility attainable within our budget. We have now it's not so important. The point is, we imagine what we're doing is we have fixed stable preferences, we have our budget of resources, and our goal is to maximize utility subject to our budget constraint. Our decisions making process is just one of constrained optimization. Ilya.
On axis, we have an amount of...
Yeah, so it's both, it's number of, so this is, let's say, so sorry, I should say this CA, CB, and then the slope of this line is the ratio of prices, okay? So anything in here is attainable within our, so this is really nice if you like doing math, because it means that you can describe people's purchasing decisions by solving problems of constrained optimization. Okay, so the point is we treat purchasing decisions as problems of constrained optimization, and to support that framework, we imagine that there is something that we are optimizing. Our utility function defines or describes our innate stable preferences. And then we can do more math. We can say, suppose we get a raise. And we can, now our budget goes up. We can say how much more stuff we buy of apples, and we can define, you know, the so-called income elasticity of consumption, and we can define the indirect utility. Suppose we have a budget, we solve the problem, choose the number of apples and bananas. So choose these to maximize the utility of CA and CB subject to the constraint that PA, CA plus PB. CB is less than or equal to our budget. This is how many dollars we have when we go to the store. These are the prices at the store, and we get to, these are our choice variables. So we choose these, and then we let's let CA star, CB star be the. That's what we actually buy. That's our optimized choices. We can derive something called V of our budget is defined as the utility that we attain when we choose optimally given our budget, this is how much utility we are able to get to buy with our budget given the current prices. I should say be conditional on prices. And we essentially, this is what we mean by our consumption level. When we say we're consuming at this level, B, what we mean is going on in the background, we've got this much money, we've got these prices, we make our optimized choices, and then we get this much utility. And as we get more income, we get more utility, we get, therefore, more consumption. What we mean, therefore, by value for this person is this, that in the background there's this machinery of optimization that they're doing. So far, so familiar? Or familiar enough?
Clear.
Okay. So so what's wrong with that? We get to do lots of math. That's nice. I studied math and I like doing it, so I get to do more this way. Do we, but what it, okay, this, to be less snarky, there's a lot of value to this framework, but the assumption that there are, what we're doing here is a few things. We're supposing that assumption that we have fixed, stable preferences. I mean, the idea is that if we go back to the grocery store the next day, we've consumed all of our apples and bananas. We go back to the grocery store the next day, we see the same prices and we have the same budget. We're going to buy the same things we did last time. Because, why? It's the same math problem. We have fixed, stable preferences. We got the same utility function. We got the same prices. We'll optimize the same way and get the same outcome, and we'll have the same level of enjoyment as we did before. Well, enjoyment, that's kind of a fuzzy thought. We'll choose the same things. Okay? Now, if we are talking about our enjoyment of safety, or our enjoyment of fresh air, or our enjoyment of anything else, symphonies, the laughter of children, free Crimea, we have the assumption that we're running with in the background is that we've got this utility function that's got everything in it. We can say any state of the world, any situation, anything we're presented with, we've got a utility function that tells us how much we value it or how we would compare it to anything else. And it's seductively, I don't know if I'm going to say simple, it's seductively straightforward to say that that's how we approach the world. This is how we make decisions about the world. We all, in a sense, already know how we will handle any choice situation. It's already stamped onto our souls. We don't have to reflect, we don't have to talk. There's nothing to talk about. What are you going to say? I already know what I want. It's stamped in my soul. See? So that's, if you buy this, it starts to make sense of why you would be suspicious of people talking about what they want. You don't have to. The talk adds nothing. The talk is just noise. The only thing that you want is some outcome, and you know what you want. You know how you would compare any two options. And so all over and over and over and over again, you are optimizing given, you're solving constrained optimization problems. Maximizing utility subject to budget constraints. And therefore, as you do this, the claim is that you are revealing your preferences. As you buy, you're faced with these prices, you buy apples and oranges, and you reveal that you prefer this combination to any of these other combinations that were available within your budget. And as your budget changes, you reveal that you preferred this to any of the others. And if the idea is if you get enough data, you see you go shopping enough times with enough budgets, enough prices, you can start to understand, extract what you actually value. And that's what you really value. You value what you reveal your values according to how you spend your scarce resources. That's the claim. So that's where what else are we assuming here? I'm going to put rationality in quotes, but the idea is that your preferences, not only are they revealed, but they are stable. You are always solving the same problem. You have fixed, stable preferences. You're always solving constrained optimization problems. Yes?
Maybe a comment to modify this last statement. Just maybe a subtle modification to your last statement
Yes.
that I want to propose. I think what economists are doing, they're not assuming that your values don't change over time or even in a short period of time.
In the simplest version they do, but go on.
They are not assuming that you're not struggling with your preferences and with your values. And what they're assuming is that at the moment of choice, these conflicts are resolved and there is clarity and stability. At the moment of choice, which is more than a moment typically. So I think it's a little more subtle. But the problem is even that assumption is problematic.
Right.
Because you may make decisions under unresolved conflicts.
Okay, I'm going to, at this point, note that Pini is partly correct and partly incorrect. So I'm going to pull rank as an economist and say, what you're taught in, let's say, introductory graduate school is this. And then there are more, yes, economists are not all stupid and they do think about more refined challenges. But a very, very standard assumption is that preferences are stable and there aren't any unresolved conflicts. And that you can actually, for example, do retirement planning based on an assumption that whatever that your preferences are stable over your time horizon. That people actually do analysis like this. So you can. There are, yes, more refined, many more refined ways to describe how people make choices in economic, that even economists deal with how people make choices in economic decision problems, but the baseline framework, that sort of what you learn in your first year standard graduate school courses assumes stable, fixed preferences. Oh yeah, just a second.
Is there any chance for change in this framework? I mean, it's very primitive and it's like very stuck in what it states. I mean, we are taking, as was said, that we are very clear in the moment of choice, but there is something before. Usually we do some choices and there is something values-driven conversation inside you, if you choose not apple or bananas, but something more important. And there is a possibility to change your preferences in this process, and how we can reflect it into the function. Is it any mechanism to reflect and to measure the change happens here?
Okay, so there is no, you're creating this abstract framework. There isn't a correct answer to this. One of the challenges is that from a modeling perspective, it is, I said, imagine you go back to the grocery store the next day, the prices are the same, your budget is the same, therefore it's the same. Well, in real life, it's never exactly the same. So it is observationally indistinguishable whether or not, if you make a different choice, is it that your preferences changed, your fundamental preferences changed, or that there's some other variable in the background that, in the state of the world, that affected how you make the choice against the background of your stable preferences. These are, in practice, observationally indistinguishable. Okay, so it is, you could say, a technical convenience. It's strongly convenient to suppose that the preferences are stable and anything that changes is something else. And the part of the problem is that if you don't make that assumption, the whole structure starts to get very wobbly analytically. That the whole structure, okay, so now you need a theory of how preferences change. Do they change because of advertising, because you got older? Do you rationally anticipate that your preferences are going to be changing? So that let's suppose I'm going to buy a house. Do I make the purchase based on what I like now? Do I rationally anticipate that I'm going to change? Am I surprised by the changes? It's hard to do any analytic work if preferences are not stable. Okay? If you don't have a thing that you are optimizing, then it's hard to solve optimization problems. And that's not maybe it's not as silly as it might sound. Yes, we know that we change. We know that the kinds of food that I liked when I was 5 is not the kind of food that I like now. This is never so. This is a set of tools to help you solve certain problems. It's not supposed to be a complete description of life, the universe, and everything. And hang on.
But here we assume that consumers are rational, which is...
So we are, generally it is an assumption that human beings, as both consumers and investors and everything, they're rational. Rationality here means that they act like this. They have stable preferences and they pursue them consistently. There was, I don't know, when I was in graduate school, there was this, people who work in economics of international development had this controversy going on, are peasants rational? Like, do subsistence farmers in Africa make their decisions like this? It's kind of, I have the impression that the whole investigation came to a dead end for the reasons that I was describing before. In practice, it's not possible to tell whether preferences are changing or something else in the world is changing. And so it's the best you can do, kind of from an operational or modeling perspective, is just assume stable preferences and try to identify other things that are changing in you. Okay? Any questions? Any questions from online? Nope. And somebody's taking photos. Okay. So assumes so people are, by rationality, we're here meaning that people, the preferences are consistent and people pursue them consistently. They're doing this same problem over and over. Ilya?
Can we add some restrictions for these utility functions?
Can we add restrictions to the utility function? Like
For
what?
example, horizontal, we can't buy more than 5 bananas.
Yeah, that would not be a restriction on the utility function. That would be, I mean, oh, you mean, okay, can we, yeah, I mean, yes, these things are called ISO utility curves. The idea is everything along here, we're indifferent between any choice along here. Everything that's to the northeast, we like better. Yes, utility, I mean, it just describes somebody's preferences. They're allowed to have whatever preferences they want. And so we could do as you described, but that, like...
For example, if we already know that in the shop, in the grocery store, there is no more than 10 bananas. And
all right, so that's not about our utility function, that's about resource availability. You could say the 11th banana's price is infinity. There is no 11th banana for sale. Okay, that is not about. If there was an 11th banana, we would perhaps buy it, but so that's not really about the shape of the utility function. And let's say the point of this graph, the point of all this stuff, is just to remind ourselves and highlight the intellectual assumptions that we're making when we're doing this cost-benefit analysis framework. Okay? What else? So we are supposing that people, it's probably more stable. So this is probably the core, stable, consistent preferences. Preferences, and people are solving these constrained optimization problems, and they thus reveal what they really want. And if we are clever in our statistics, we can look at the choices they make and extract what they really value. Essentially, if we get enough data, we can trace out what that utility function is. And since it is stable and consistent, and since people make decisions in this way, we are understanding then what they truly value. We understand if we give them a faster highway to drive down, how much they will value that. And we don't have to ask them. In fact, asking them is a waste of time. They will probably lie. But if we observe what they do in the real world and they make real decisions with real resource constraints, then we'll learn what they actually value. And there's so that's behavior. Another closely related methodological individualism. So the idea here is that we can just look at what these people do as individuals and their shopping choices. We don't have to have a big assembly and ask people collectively what they want, because we just treat them as individual units. People are, people individually go shopping, individually buy things, individually make choices about where they locate themselves, and each of these choices is in each of these they're solving some constrained optimization problem. And by observing these, we can extract what they truly value. So we don't have to talk about the forces of history. We don't have to talk about political parties. We don't have to talk about any of these kinds of social aggregates. Yeah? Institutions. Well, institutions can matter insofar as they affect prices and resource availability and choice options.
But the behavior, all behaviors in the market eventually are ultimately explained by individuals
making choices.
Only institutional behavior.
Even institutional behavior. Institutions, in fact, are composed of individuals who are interacting in some kind of equilibrium between rational optimizing agents. Paul Krugman, the economist, he gave a definition of economics. Let me give there's an older definition, which is from Paul Samuelson, Nobel laureate, who defined economics as the study of how individuals, I hope I get this about it, this will be close, how individuals and societies allocate limited resources to satisfy their unlimited desires. So essentially defining economics as an investigation of these problems in constrained optimization. We always want more, we always want more, always want more. We can't do all that we want, and so we investigate how we solve these problems of trying to have unlimited amounts but facing constraints. And then Paul Krugman gave what I would think of as maybe a more modern definition, which is it's economics studies interactions between, equilibria that arise in interactions between intelligent optimizing agents. So you could say an institutional setup, an institution itself forms, or the form of an institution is itself an equilibrium between all these agents that are optimizing within it. Everybody in there is optimizing. It's a cutthroat world. Everyone's optimizing for themselves, and what you have is, even if they think that they are trying to do the best for society, even if they think they're doing something noble, that's just another thing that they want. I think I'm working for democracy. Well, I have a taste for democracy. It's my preference. I'm doing the same thing as everybody else. Somebody else has a taste for caviar, and they pursue that. Somebody else has a taste for, vodka and fast cars. Somebody else has a taste for taking care of their grandmother. These are all equivalent, ethically, morally, as far as we're concerned. And if we're solving problems like this, we don't judge. You have a taste for a project to improve democracy, fine for you. We don't judge that. If someone else likes to do heroin, it's fine for them. We don't judge. Someone else likes to, I've met a lot of economists, they really believe this. They really think like this. That it is absolutely not our place there is no accounting for taste. It is absolutely not our place no, they say this. They don't really, that pisses me off. They don't really think this, but they'll say they think this when it's convenient. But, and we can talk about, it's ultimately that argument is self-annihilating, because you say, I have a taste for analytic rigor, you don't have a taste for analytic rigor, so what makes your taste for analytic rigor better than my taste for fuzziness? Okay. That's one of the implications then, that an implication of these core assumptions is that there really are no value judgments that we render, other than if we imagine that what we're doing is that the only value judgments are those of individuals, and the only way that they express their value judgments really is in their purchasing decisions, their allocation of their own scarce resources. And our job as an analyst is to understand what these individuals really value without any judgment about some things being better than others, and to evaluate projects on this basis. So if the people say that what they really want is heroin and cigarettes and pornography and not taking care of their grandparents, then our job as a social cost-benefit analyst is to favor projects that deliver those things that they say that they want as they show that they want. Because we don't make judgments about beyond what people
I do
choose.
judgments. It's my
You do?
Yeah, it's my personal position.
Okay, so that's good for you. You decide to judge people, and I decide not to, and that's okay. I don't judge you for not judging. I'm very judging. Okay, so you see in this somewhat sarcasm both, I mean, I think we're now touching both on strengths and weaknesses. All right, so some of the, let me see, did I miss Peony or anyone else? Do you think I missed anything important? I'm going to say no. You can think about it. Maybe come up with something tomorrow. I think these are the highlights. Okay, strengths. We've talked some about yesterday about the strengths. I mean, it is doing this stuff requires you to be careful. It requires you to look carefully at each project, think about the resources it consumes and produces, and think about how much value you're really creating. And that's a good thing. It's a good exercise. And one can point to places where, when it's not done, people make what seem like pretty big mistakes. So there's Kip Viscusi, who's at Harvard. He's a really good analyst. He's done some look at what are meta-analysis comparing results of different cost-benefit analyses and methodological work. So one of the things he's produced is it's what's called a league table. That is, you look at how different studies, different studies come up with, or different contexts, you come up with different prices. So one looked at various regulations concerning, in the United States in particular, concerning health and safety. So there are many, many, many. If you buy a lawnmower that cuts grass, there are lots of regulations about it. It's got to have a bar on there so you don't stick your foot and cut off your toes. If you buy a space heater, it's cold in your room, you turn on the space heater, okay, it's not supposed to catch fire, it's not supposed to pump fumes out that kill you, etc. So there are, you can't sell a car anymore that doesn't have seat belts and various, mirrors and stuff on it. All this stuff. The car would be cheaper without these things. And there are arguments that say basically, if people care about seat belts, well, let them decide how much they care. Let them decide whether or not they want to pay extra for a car with these safety features. Let people decide. Maybe it's, in a way, you could say it discriminates against people who are very poor, to say that they have no choice but to buy these more expensive equipment that have the additional safety features. Maybe they would rather take those risks on themselves, maybe they only, mow their lawn once a year, I don't know. And they could have the benefit of a cheaper piece of equipment, but they're not allowed to buy that. It's not available in the market because of the law. So that's an argument people make, that you should let the market decide how much, let people decide for themselves how much, let them solve their own constraint optimization problems instead of choosing for them how much safety they have to purchase. So anyway, Kip Viscusi looks at a number of these different regulations and asks the question, for different kinds of regulations, what is the cost of the regulation per unit of avoided injury? Make sense? Okay, so you normalize everything by units of avoided injury. And and values of statistical life and such. And what he finds is that the differences are enormous. That the space heaters turned out that that's very, very cost effective. It's very, very cheap per unit of safety delivered to make more safer space heaters. Seat belts are pretty good, and then there's more, and then there's the one at the, that's like, it's like, you know, the space heaters, I forget, it's something like $100,000 per avoided fire and death and so on. Then at the very top, okay, you're working in a laboratory, you work with formaldehyde. There has to be this hood that sucks up all the air and filters it before it goes outside. You cannot work with, like in certain industrial settings, with formaldehyde indoors without having one of these setups. And it turns out that's like about over $1 billion per avoided death, right? So like $100,000 to over $1 billion. That's the scale of difference that we're working on. In other words, we do not have a rational allocation of resources going on in our society. We have some regulations that are very cost effective in terms of delivering what we say we're trying to deliver, and some which are absurdly expensive. And that's a good exercise to go through. That actually starts to create the case for an argument that, you know, you can, because as we said, there is a limit to how much safety we can actually afford. We cannot have a fully risk-free society, a fully, completely safe society. It makes sense to think about these questions about whether or not you know, to do careful analysis of this kind. That's it. Makes sense. What are some of the weaknesses? So we spoke about this a little bit before. I think that given all of this stuff and the need to extract these prices from observed behavior, and the difficulty as you get farther from markets to identify what are the actual prices, there is a serious risk that certain kinds of projects are more amenable to this kind of analysis than others. So those that have to do with physical stuff is, you know, if you have to do with saving people time by having a faster highway, that's the kind of thing that's more amenable to this kind of analysis. When you start asking museums and libraries and archives, no, please come in.
We film a little bit.
Okay, sure. When you start asking museums and libraries and archives, justify yourself in this way. Justify that people actually care about what you're doing. If you start saying to you know, the national park system, to people who are trying to conserve the environment, tell me that people actually care about what you're doing. You have an arts budget. It's in the U.S. National Endowment for the Humanities. Why should we spend money on that? People can go buy, if they want to go to the movies, they go to the movies. If they want a library, they can set up their own. Why should we spend our scarce public resources on these things that you cannot demonstrate people actually care about using this rigorous framework? I've come to be suspicious of these kinds of claims, but there's actually a real fight going on, at least in the US, and I expect elsewhere, about whether you actually have local governments shutting down their libraries. You have the saying, well, you know, people want books, there are bookstores, there's Amazon, Or if you're going to make a case for why there should be the National Endowment for the Arts, there's Hollywood. What do we need the National Endowment for the Arts? There's a risk, I think, that the difficulty of the techniques, the difficulty of extracting the correct accounting prices for some kinds of projects as opposed to others would put a bias on the kinds of projects that are justified in this way. There's another related, though distinct, problem, I think, in the political sphere. Only certain kinds of projects are actually challenged to justify themselves in this way. Nobody ever says, oh, you want another, say in the United States, you want another aircraft carrier? Okay, let's have at it. Show me a cost, tell me exactly what resources, what benefits you're going to be producing, down to the last nautical mile. Tell me the accounting prices of each of those resources and give me a cost-benefit analysis in this way. Now, I saw the former head of the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. Name was Christine Todd Whitman. Before that, she was governor of New Jersey. She was appearing before a committee of the United States Senate, and I remember her saying that she believed that every environmental regulation should be subject to a strict cost-benefit test. Every one. And you hear that and you think, well, I mean, that sounds, maybe we should do that. I don't know, that sounds all right. But the problem is that if only certain, let's say, politically less well-protected sectors are subject to cost-benefit tests and others are not, then the political process is not actually doing this in a rigorous way. In other words, there's a risk of opportunism in that this will not, there's no way that this will actually be applied in a consistent, rigorous way across all manner of projects. So that's a problem. Not exactly maybe an intrinsic weakness, but it's a problem of how it's done in practice. The problem is that in practice this can become just another kind of rhetoric. Just another kind of, like, I could have made a TikTok video and instead I produced this report. Okay, so that's what we're going to turn to next time is we're going to start to talk about other frameworks for public choice and decision making and other theories of public choice. And I will invite you, as I said, I invite you to prepare a presentation along the lines I said, and if you want to talk with me online or here, wherever, about your topic, I'm very pleased to discuss that with you. That's it for today. Thank you very much.
Thank you.